I came across a chart recently that I just can't stop thinking about. A Harvard business professor and economist surveyed over 5,000 Americans, asking them how they thought wealth was distributed across the United States. Here's what people believed. They imagined the country divided into 5 equal groups, from the poorest 20% to the wealthiest 20%. Each group, they thought, held a fair share of the nation's money. Then, the professor asked what they felt would be an ideal way to divide the wealth, and astonishingly, 92%, nearly 9 out of 10 people, agreed that it should be more balanced than they assumed it was. That, in itself, says a lot. Americans already know the system isn't fair, that wealth is tilted heavily to one side. But what's even more eye-opening is the difference between what people think the reality is and what the reality actually looks like. Forget the ideal for a second. Here's what people believe the wealth distribution is. Now here's the real picture, and it's far more lopsided than most could imagine. The bottom 40% of Americans, that's nearly half the population, barely have any visible wealth at all. You can hardly even see them on the chart. Meanwhile, the top 1% owns more wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans think the entire top 20% should have. Hard to believe, right? So let's simplify this idea. Imagine America as just 100 people: teachers, doctors, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, lawyers, and a few CEOs or celebrities. Line them up from poorest to richest. Now, let's take all the wealth in the U.S., about $54 trillion back in 2009, and spread it among these 100 people. If everything were shared equally, that'd be socialism. And we all know that's not realistic. People need motivation to work hard and chase the American dream. So, let's look at the ideal balance most Americans wanted. Something like this. The richest folks are about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest. The poor aren't actually poor. The middle class is strong, and there's a smooth climb toward wealth. Republicans and Democrats alike mostly agreed. 9 out of 10 said this looked like a fair setup. Now, here's what people think the U.S. actually looks like. Not perfect, but still somewhat reasonable. The poor are struggling a bit more. The middle class is thinner, and the rich are doing quite well, maybe 100 times better off than the poorest. But reality? That's an entirely different story. In truth, the poorest Americans barely even register. The middle class, almost indistinguishable from the poor. Even those in the upper middle, say the top 10 to 20%, aren't as wealthy as you might think. Only the top 10% truly stand out. And the top 1%, they're in a league of their own. Their wealth is so massive, it doesn't even fit on the chart. 1% of Americans now control about 40% of the nation's wealth. Think about that. Out of 100 people, 80 of them, together, own only 7% of the wealth. And this gap has only grown wider over the last 30 years. In 1976, the richest 1% took home about 9% of all income. Today, they take nearly 25%. Their share has nearly tripled. The top 1% own half of all the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50%, they own barely 0.5%. They're not investing, they're just trying to survive. Sure, many wealthy people work incredibly hard, but do we really believe a CEO works 380 times harder than his average employee? Not the janitor, the average worker. That average employee would have to work more than a month just to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We don't have to swing to socialism to fix this imbalance. We don't even have to reach the ideal distribution most Americans imagine. We just need to wake up and realize that the reality in this country isn't what we think it is.